Hey everyone, today I'm going to show you 5 different ways to stretch your quadriceps. My favorite ways in stretching into the quads. I'm Kaycie and let's jump right on in. First one I'm going to start off with is from the belly. So come down into a nice prone position. In my honest opinion, I find this to be the most accessible for me and for my students, so I teach this one pretty often. From your forearms down onto the ground, you're just going to take a bend into, let's start with the right knee. I'm going to kickstand my left elbow out a little bit so I have something to lean into as I reach back with the right hand for the foot. I'm reaching for the inside of the foot, thumb pointing up, but you can reach on to the foot however it feels good for you. And if you would like to use a strap or a belt or whatever you have to loop around the foot, it helps to create a little bit of length. Especially if you're having difficulty pulling the foot in, you can't reach back for it. Taking that strap around it first, holding onto the strap will help to create a little extra space. So as you're pulling it in, you can start to pull it in towards the glute. Try not to let your knees splay out too far away from each other, keeping them about hips width or slightly wider apart. Now, if you are fairly flexible in this one, as you pull it in towards the glute, you might be able to roll the fingers over the top, getting a nice little rotation into the shoulder and pulling the heel towards the glute or slightly to the outside of that hip. Now you can hold there, feeling the hip points press down into the ground and lengthening the spine forward, which will help to increase a little bit of intensity here. Now gently releasing, obviously you would do both sides. I want you to be able to play with all the different variations, but make sure however much time you spend in one side, you're spending in the other side as well and bringing balance into the body. So next one we'll come into. We're going to come into a seated position sitting on the heels. Now this position is not always accessible for everybody, especially if you have knee issues or you have really tight ankles or feet. This one can be really uncomfortable. So just know there's different ways of approaching quad stretching. If this one isn't your jam, switch to one that is. There's plenty of variation. So if you're not able to sit like this, you'll skip over and go on to the next one. Otherwise, you can do it either propped up, or if you can, separate the feet and let the hips sink all the way down towards the ground. You don't want the knees to start peeling off the ground, nor do we want to feel a lot of pressure in the joints. We want to feel a little bit of mild discomfort into the muscles themselves, but you should still be able to breathe without feeling any pain. So we'll give you a kind of a step-by-step. This might be enough. You can drop back onto the hands, lift the chest. This might be enough. Next step would be lowering the forearms, lifting the chest. And last step would be walking the elbows in, lowering the back and shoulders, maybe slightly tucking the tail, just reaching it forward. Arms can also reach over the head if you want extra heart opening in this position. Now this one feels really good, but if it does feel like there's a lot of pressure, come out into the variation that feels a little more appropriate for your body. And then coming out is essentially going to be the exact same thing, but in reverse. So if you're all the way down, start to come up onto your elbows, forearms, and then come up onto the hands, and then slowly coming forward out of the position. If you wanted to do one leg at a time, or you just have one side that's a little cranky, but ultimately you do like this stretch, you can just extend one leg out and keep the stretch isolated onto one side, whatever feels best for you. Next variation would be from a lunge position. So low lunge, stepping one foot forward, getting the knee over the ankle, and the back knee is down at the ground. Now, whatever foot is forward is the same hand that's going to reach up, bending the back knee and just grabbing a hold of the foot. Now, anytime you're grabbing the foot, you're always going to have the option of having a strap or something around the foot to hold on to, just to create that extra space and length for your arm. Now, as you pull the foot in, you're going to feel a lot of intensity. Make sure you're able to stay in your breath. You can either sink in and pull the foot in, or there's a nice gap of space between the heel and the glutes. But one of my personal favorites is to pull the hips back first, connect it with the heel, or as best as you can, and then maintain that as you sink the hips back down. And it just brings a little extra intensifier into the stretch. And then you'll release when you're ready. Try not to let it slingshot back, and then just come out of it and do both sides. Once again, feel them all out, see what works best for you. The next one is from a pigeon pose, or a nice figure 4 stretch. I'm gonna pull the left knee behind my left wrist, but you can do either side. The foot will be in front of the hips as far forward as you'd like. I like it a little closer to the hips on this one. And then I'm gonna sink my hips back and down. That right leg is long behind me. And I'm gonna come up onto the hands. So once again, if this is too much, you can always bring a prop underneath the hips to kind of lift them up a little bit higher and hopefully decrease a little bit of that pressure that's sinking down onto the knee and into the hips. But if this is a comfortable position for you, great, we'll work it here. Just make sure that you don't kick off onto your hip for this one, okay? We wanna make sure the hips stay nice and level, and you're also gonna get a nice deep stretch into that front hip as well. So from here, it's a bending into the back knee and reaching back with that same side hand to pull it in. And as you pull it in, you can start to draw the ribs forward, hard up, and you'll get a nice opening through the entire front side of the body here. So this one can be a little intense, especially with the angle of that front leg. You're already getting a hip stretch in the front side. You're just adding a little bonus with the back side. Coming out when you're ready, pressing back to tabletop, or any position from there, and just kind of shaking it out. Okay, next one we're gonna do is from a standing position. So from a standing position, we're all pretty familiar with this one. I feel like we've done this in a million times in like a PE class or any kind of stretching activity. So from standing, I'm gonna do it while holding onto the wall, and I recommend you do the same or holding onto something. If you're not using the wall, you're just gonna add the balancing component as well, which is not a bad thing, but for the sake of stretching, I like to get a little bit deeper into the stretch itself rather than worrying about stabilizing the entire time. So bring weight into one leg, holding on to whatever you would like, and then bend the knee and reach back with the same side hand, or use a strap around the foot, and then point the knee down so that both of the knees are essentially side by side. And then you're just gonna stretch the thigh down towards the knee and feel your front hip points pressing slightly forward as you draw the heel in towards the glute. This one feels really nice, but the more I kind of accentuate the length and the hip driving forward, the more I start to open up a little bit deeper into those quads. Coming out, making sure you do both sides. So that concludes the 5 top ways to stretch your quads for this specific video. They're my personal favorites. And I kind of listed which ones were my favorites, which ones are more accessible, which ones are a little bit more difficult. I did want to throw a bonus in there today. I'll go over it really quickly, but this one, the reason I'm leaving it as a bonus is because it can be really difficult to get into. It just depends on your body, the flexibility into your hips especially, but I'll show it really quickly here. You'll need a wall space. So from a wall space, you're just gonna slide one knee towards the wall so that the foot is going up the length of the wall and supported by the wall, okay? If you need cushion underneath that knee, go for it. Now with the hands, the hardest part of this position is stepping the other foot forward. So you're gonna really drive your knee into the ground, maybe pull the hips back a little bit and step the opposite foot forward, okay? Now the objective here really is to kind of press the hips back towards the wall. As the hips press back towards the wall, you're gonna deepen that stretch naturally here. Okay, and then if maybe the hips do go towards the wall, you can always adjust the front foot to wherever feels most appropriate for your balance. And then you can even work on walking the hands up the leg and eventually working your upper body up against that wall as well. Now, same thing we did. It's a lengthening of the tail down, feeling the front hip points lift up, which is going to create extra space through the front of the hips. Okay, and then just feel that slight drawing forward through the hip points. This one actually is an amazing stretch, so long as it feels good on your knee, being down onto the ground, and it's accessible to get into. Coming out, walk it out, draw the foot back in, and take your time going into both sides. So I hope you enjoyed those stretches. I would love to hear which ones work best for your body, why you like them. Feel free to hit a like, share in the comments, share with a friend, and don't forget to hit subscribe. Thank you all so much.